Hey everyone, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Once again, that website address is www.theclinicaltrialsguru.com, the internet's best place for clinical trials content and information. We interview guest gurus, what we call guest gurus, on a daily basis. And today we are very fortunate to have Mr. Weddle. His name is Daniel Weddle. He's the CEO and founder of SiteAvail, and Daniel's going to definitely tell you guys a little bit more about that, or I should say a lot more about that. And also he's going to talk about himself and his background in clinical trials and all the experiences that he's had up until this point. So welcome to the show, Daniel. Thank you very much for coming.
It's my pleasure, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
How is the weather out there in Boston? I heard that people are complaining of the heat.
Finally, yeah, it feels like just in the last couple of weeks, it's gone from early spring to late summer. With all the crazy weather around these days, it's too bad that we skip over a real long spring because it's beautiful. But yeah, we've got some heat here now.
Yeah, we interviewed a guy from Bioclinica yesterday, and he was out in the East Coast. He was either in New York or Boston. And he was just complaining about how muggy it was and how humid it was. And I mean, out here where I am in California, people can't see, but behind me there's a window. But we're actually having a lot of overcast. It's like 65 degrees right now. So, pretty nice day.
Enjoy it.
Thanks, Daniel. So let's get right to it. Tell me a little bit about yourself and about your current company, SiteAvail. And then maybe we'll just work our way backwards through the timeline and kind of follow your career throughout clinical trials.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I have 24 years of experience in the clinical development industry, all on the vendor or CRO side. My background spans from operations, being a clinical research coordinator and a CRA in my early years, about 5 years of experience in that in total, and then in business development and entrepreneurial. And business development really has been from everywhere from first in human all the way to large FDA-required post-marketing surveillance studies. And I started SiteAvail back in 2003 and have had it going since then and really repositioned it in the last few years to where we are today in a focus of patient recruitment and innovation and helping out from a business development perspective as well with innovations on an IT basis or process and service basis for newer companies that are really seeking to penetrate the industry. And so really we're focusing mostly on patient recruitment and as well an add-on, as you can imagine, retention services. I'm out looking right now currently for collaborations with companies that offer some innovative tactics and strategies for the retention to really give a nice package of not only recruitment, but as we know, once the patients are in, we need to retain them to achieve statistical significance in the overall endpoints of the study. So that's kind of an overview right now.
Okay. So what is it exactly that SiteAvail does as far as like, because we interviewed Deanna from D. Anderson and Company recently, and she was talking about how her company kind of focuses on the niche studies, the difficult to recruit populations. Does SiteAvail do something like that, or are you guys more on the broader recruitment type of studies?
Well, I position SiteAvail as a company that offers innovative tactics to support a strategy for patient recruitment overall. We know who the major players are, and Diana is certainly one of the pioneers. I've known her as a friend for a long time in this industry, and I would say that although she's and her company is focusing on a niche of types of studies, I think that they also position themselves as quote-unquote a full-service patient recruitment organization. Okay. And certainly look at this medium and see if it makes sense to go ahead and have an opportunity to geo-target the video messaging directly to patients in those types of settings, again, in that medical type of venue. And then also outside of the medical venue, you can imagine these days you go down the street and you see in a convenience store, in a grocery store, in a bar, in a hotel, on a gas station pump top, all of these places that are out of the medical type of a situation where you can actually look at what the patient and demographic profile associated with a study, their life pattern is, and again, do the targeting, geo-targeting, and micro-targeting to the patient population based on their life patterns.
So the idea is you've got this captive audience, which is the patients. They're in a waiting room. They may be in a hospital room somewhere. And you guys install the TVs in the offices, or is that done by someone else?
So the VideoAd Network is the company that actually owns the infrastructure.
Okay, so you partner with
They
them.
actually own the servers, the software that does all of the serving out of their servers over the internet directly to the HD TVs. They own the TVs. So what I've done is really, as I've called it, an aggregator, a VideoAd Network aggregator, I've gone out and wrapped my arms around that industry as a medium that can be applied to this industry, our industry, clinical development, and have created affiliations with several of these video ad networks that do just what we're talking about. And their focus and the model may be different from, if I may just say, video ad network, VAN, VAN, from van to van, and that one may just focus only in installing TVs in pediatricians. Another one installs in OBGYNs. Another one installs in hospitals. Another one may not care what the specialty or the venue might be, but from an impression standpoint and trying to create awareness through advertising with video, they just care that there's 2,000 patients going through that venue on a monthly basis. So I've gone out and I've tried to learn a lot in a couple of years ago about the industry. Gone out to my network in the industry and asked, look, has anybody tried this? And it took about 8 months before I found anybody that actually said, yeah, you know what, we actually did try that. So for me, it was pause to say, geez, there is an opportunity to innovate, apply something that's already there, not have to build it, but be more of a distributor and, as I said, an aggregator to be able to augment the strategy for advertising associated with, patient recruitment.
And so you guys have been using this model since you opened in 2002?
No, 2003, 2004, and right up until about 2008 was a different model. It was more geared toward, well, it was, I'll have to step back a little bit, but back in 2002, 2003, when we were still probably lower than 50% adoption of EDC, electronic data capture, for clinical trials. Still a lot of paper around from legacy studies that had been completed, from studies that were ongoing, and even for studies that were still upcoming. And I saw an opportunity, having been a coordinator way back in 1988, when the FDA knocked on my door and said, "Hi, we're here to do an audit." Mm-hmm. I had just literally been there for maybe 2 months.
Okay.
The FDA auditor wanted to see documents, and I'm sitting there holding the bag, trying to work through an audit, being a newbie in this industry. And I'll tell you what, being a newbie in the industry and having the FDA knock on your door and being responsible, that was very eye-opening. And it was an epiphany that always stuck with me, such that it manifested in 2002 of me creating a model to centralize the management of archival of completed study documents at the investigator level, project-wide, so that somebody could, if indeed there was a requirement for an audit years down the road, have an insurance policy, come back to me and say, geez, all of the investigators that were involved in this NDA, we need to go back and audit so many of those. You can imagine at the time, the model was such that, being an innovator and kind of augmenting some needs that really are an insurance policy and not the highest priority in the world, because as we know, monitors come in, they do a closeout visit, they do their checklist, and they say, here you go, Site, since you know that, Dan,
Right.
Probably better than anybody now working with sites. And I saw a need to help that whole process out, the archival, the auditing, the tracking thereof. But unfortunately, a major threat that you can't really see coming when you're doing your SWOT analyses, in that Vioxx hit the fan. Everybody within 2 weeks with whom I had projects, contracts, letters of intent, and proposals outstanding called up and said, we got to suck back the money that we were going to allot to an innovative opportunity and have to put it to safety surveillance signaling systems. Which, I shrug my shoulders and say, unfortunately, that's the right thing to do from the industry's perspective. And so I had to put SiteAvail on the back burner for a few years, resurrected it back in 2009 to where we are today, and where I just mentioned the positioning from the standpoint of patient recruitment and retention now.
Right. Let's go back to this now. Vioxx, for those people out there who don't know, let us know a little bit about what happened, what went on, and then what were the ramifications for the industry.
Oh, jeez. I may not be the penultimate person to talk to about the science behind it, but and I have to also be, careful with regard from a legal perspective on Merck's positions and all of that. But what happened was, I believe there was not full disclosure on some issues, serious adverse events and potentially deaths that had occurred during clinical studies, as well as during the time that the product was on the market. And there were not really highly regulated and highly robust systems to detect and analyze very quickly the occurrence of these problems with the administration to patients of this product. And when I think there were some meta-analyses done and some signals that were highly publicized, Merck had to come to the conclusion of saying, yeah, you know what, this is something that we need to do. The right thing to do is pull the product from the market. And I think what it did from a ramification standpoint is that, geez, once you put a product on the market, pharma, you need to have very, very strict pharmacovigilance, risk management plans, safety surveillance systems that will detect, analyze very, very quickly and on a central basis the need to monitor the safety and the welfare of the population in which it's intended. And so what happened was, I think everybody meaning the sponsors, did come to realization that, geez, we need to invest in these types of systems. And a lot of money was put toward those over the years that followed. And again, unfortunately for me, but for patients and for the health of the industry, I think that was something that everybody really needed to do.
Yeah, so because of that, because of the fallout from Vioxx, you lost letters of intent. Now, who were these letters from, just so we get that clear?
Oh, okay. Well, those were from clients. Those were directly from sponsors,
Okay.
Pharma companies, that is, and a couple of CROs, as well as I have done some work for some individual investigators, and the bang for the buck, if you can imagine, is working on a project level with a sponsor or CRO across all of your sites, rather than individually with sites. So, those are the types of projects that had gone in 2003 from single and 2 and 3 sites to finally getting to the point where, okay, we were looking at 65 sites. We were looking at actually, we were going to be involved at a company-wide level for one sponsor, in that they
Hmm. Now, switching gears here, I'm always curious, and I'm sure a lot of the audience are also curious. How does someone like you decide to start a company like SiteAvail? I know you talked a little bit about it, your experiences as a coordinator back in '88 and getting audited. But what was the initial idea for SiteAvail? What was its specific purpose at the time that you founded it?
Right, 2002 is when, let's see, I've been in the industry for quite some time. At the time, it was with a startup EDC company that I was a business development representative, a senior director, first person in their sales and marketing, really trying to get some strategy. And, quite frankly, the major competition, certainly, phase forward and Medidata were out of the box, and there were a couple of other players, we know. They were already out there. But still, the largest competitor was paper. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And even looking back and chuckling at my business plan back in 2002, 2003, looking at the time of the adoption rates going up to over the 5 or so years thereafter, going to 50, 60 plus. I can look back and say, geez, that was right on. But that was really the reason, I would say, working in the EDC environment, certainly competing against the big guys, but more so competing against paper and saying, there's an opportunity to help out people here. I've been a coordinator. I know what it's like having to go back and try with the turnover of coordinators, with the turnover of CRAs, just the turnover in general in industry, with lack of tracking systems to be able to have an efficient audit down the road. I took the chance, and it was going okay. I did a little bit of tangential service provision with regard to taking now some of these CRFs, turning them into PDFs and support early on in a development program of e-clinical trials and e-submissions on rolling basis. And quite frankly, that may have taken my eye off the ball a little bit, but it was kind of customer-driven. Look, if you could do this for us, that'd be great. If you could do this for us, that'd be great. So that was customer-driven, whereas that type of a service, whereas starting my company in 2002 and 3 was basically the epiphany from 1988, having the FDA knock, moving that forward and saying, there's still a lot of paper out there that needs some efficiency.
Okay, so just to get this straight, after the Vioxx fallout, you had to pivot and you became a patient recruitment firm.
Well, I put SiteAvail on the back burner for a few years. I'd gone back to the CRO industry with some starts and stops, working for companies didn't work out, working for companies that got acquired within a very short amount of time, so kind of last in, first out. And it happened again, and at the end of 2008, after having risen to a vice president of global business development for an international CRO, and their willingness to want to basically sell out, but not mine. I took a chance in going back to resurrecting SiteAvail with the new business model, focusing, knowing that I'd be in patient recruitment, but as I mentioned earlier on, also starting it off with needing a revenue stream, and that being offered through my ability to do business development on a retainer basis for some innovators in the industry from technology standpoint and service and CRO standpoint as well. And I still do a little bit of that, and as I said, as I continue to expand my offerings, we'll still offer sales channels for companies that do make sense to augment the overall patient recruitment service offering.
All right, yeah, we will definitely come back to the new SiteAvail story. I just want to go back a little bit to 2003 because people rarely talk about these things, but you essentially had to shut down your company, right?
2003, 2004, I had it going, and the beginning of 2005 is when I said, you know what? I don't know how long this dearth of revenue could be substantiated, and quite frankly, I needed to get back full time. So that's what I did. Sucked it up and said, let's put this on the back burner. Now, having said all of that, having done some work for companies that in the document storage model that I started, I had, and I still have, responsibility for archiving documents and retrieval, if indeed any of those clients do need retrieval from the storage facilities that I've coordinated. I'm still on the hook for that. And so, with regard to SiteAvail going away altogether, that could not happen. Certainly needed to uphold all of the financial, tax, legal, insurance, et cetera, for a small company startup while I was doing everything that I needed to do from 2005 through 2008. So,
definitely.
It was a shock. You can imagine it was one of those, as I said, that you do your SWOT analysis and the T at the end of it. Nobody has the crystal ball on things like Vioxx happening.
Now, how tough was it? Did you have employees, or was it just yourself at the time?
Just myself.
Okay, so it was, in that sense, it was, a little bit easier to make the decision. It's always more difficult when you have employees. Yeah, I can definitely attest to the storage times that the sponsors want the sites to have. I mean, now it's something like 50 years. So, I kid you not, we had this one study, and we're required to maintain the records until 2030. So, I mean, that just gives you guys watching a sense of the regulations that we have to follow. So there are certainly lots of opportunities there. Now let's come back to
one point on that is the regs are very the guidelines really are they're kind of ambiguous. Because it says that 2 years after the clinical trial is completed, or 2 years after the product is marketed, whatever is longer. But then, in addition to that, the sponsors will have their own SOPs that will require for a longer time. So my offering was based on a unit basis for pricing purposes. Okay, hey, let's just do it for 15 years, and let's do it for 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of that time frame, I give you a call. Do we need to retain them anymore? If not, they're gone. With documentation of appropriate disposal.
Yeah, essentially, for those of you research professional study coordinators out there watching that are curious, each sponsor has different requirements. Essentially, from what I understand, you've got to keep them forever, and more than likely your grandkids are going to have to keep them forever as well. So, you're just going to have to keep those documents forever, right?
It's probably the best way to think about it. The challenge, I'm sure, all you coordinators listening, is trying to put a price on anything like that associated with a single study. Get as much as you can. That's what I would ask. You know what it is, and on a monthly basis, and if indeed a sponsor says it needs to be 30 years, here's the price for 30 years. Make sure it's in there.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's going to evolve. I mean, of course, nobody expects them to be kept forever, but essentially they can be, and with the movement towards digital technology and digital storage, I mean, you could pretty much store anything on something the size of an iPhone these days, so it'll actually get easier to do and cheaper to do. The question will be who will actually have access to it if, let's say, 100 years from now, someone may ask for the records. Who knows who's going to have them, but theoretically, it's best to just keep them forever. That's what I tell my coordinators. So, back to SiteAvail in its current form.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, when was your first... Because now you do mostly recruitment, right? Is it like 99% recruitment?
Yeah, right now it is.
So how did you get your first big client? Or your first client, period? Was it a research site? Was it a CRO? Was it a sponsor?
First, let's see, launch was beginning of 2010. And from a strategic standpoint, so many clients are hot on metrics. A lot of money has been put into patient recruitment with not a whole lot of ROI. And that's just general, right? That's just general. You still look at all the reports. 80% of studies are still not on time per the anticipated timeline, right? So from a strategic standpoint, I know that I was going to be up against that requirement in the industry. Show us your metrics, and we will, we'll be able to assess whether or not we will invest in an innovation, because this truly is unique, bleeding edge. No one's done it. As I told you, I had talked to people for months and months and quarters, and one person said, "Yeah, I did one study, and it was a failure." Oh, by the way, because it was old DVD based. So I knew that I needed to go to the industry with metrics in hand and say, is this going to work? Here it does work, here it does work, it doesn't work there, it does work here, it doesn't work there. So what I needed to do was find the right video ad networks that were willing to give up a cohort of time, their ad space inventory for free, and coordinate some pilots that would show some trends, that would certainly operationalize the model, and give me a handful of studies to go back to the industry and said, okay, you guys asked me, I know you need metrics, and here's what I got. So the first project was in the first quarter of 2010. First project was with one of the patient recruitment organizations that took a chance. And oh, by the way, free.
Free.
So the risk to them in seeing if indeed this was going to work was minimal. Right?
So it was free.
It was to a study that was coming toward the end of the project, and that seemed to be the case for the pilots going forward as well. Is the service providers certainly need to differentiate themselves, and they need to. And how do they do it? They need to do it through innovation. But are they scared to do it on a first-off basis with someone like myself, who's a vendor, scared to go and create things without having a whole lot of metrics to be able to show their preferred sponsors? And so you have to overcome that challenge. And so again, it was a strategy. Offered 5 free pilots to friends in the industry. Called them up and said, hey, who's willing to take a risk on this? And so patient recruitment organizations and sponsors, we got them in the same rooms together and said, okay, let's see if we can try this. So I did my first project in epilepsy. We did a COPD study, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and very germane to your business as well. Did some prodromal and onset Alzheimer's programs. Those came directly from a site perspective, interestingly, and ADHD. And the largest scaled-up project was, and this was one of the paid ones as well, was in type 1 diabetes that showed some nice outcomes. So it really took an effort to, even giving away free opportunities. It still was a challenge because in my ability to evangelize to the video ad network industry, the opportunity for revenue, that is, look, I'm someone who's networked into the industry and can go find you some video, that is patient recruitment video, to put onto your networks. I'm still going to them with, they know nothing about clinical trials, they don't know me, and so they're not going to take a risk of being able to give up their free inventory. And I actually did get a couple of them who were very hungry and had quite a bit of free ad space and said, geez, we're not really losing much out of this. Let's go ahead and give away, for example, a cohort of 50 TVs worth of a couple of minutes a day, or 30 seconds, I should say, out of a half an hour loop of time. Mm-hmm. And the video ad networks who opportunity to go ahead and try this on an operational basis, and again, free, to see if we could drive patients to a website, to a call center, actually showed a nice narrowing of the recruitment funnel from the ratio of responses at the top down to referrals at the bottom after having gone through all pre-screening, as compared to what the traditional television, radio, advertising recruitment funnel looked like.
Okay. Now, as we wrap up, we cannot ignore the topic of social media and its impact on clinical trial patient recruitment. What are your thoughts on this?
Show me the metrics, just like all the clients say. Show me the metrics. I'm one of those persons that on LinkedIn that gives right back when everybody's asking me, "Where are your metrics?" Look, I'm happy to share them, transparent with them. I have to be if people want to take a look. And I don't see people publishing the social media metrics that they're telling us are wonderful. So I definitely believe in it. One of the add-on services that I'm going to be rolling out very shortly is community-based, because I see a major opportunity. People are doing it to an extent, but probably not as much as they should be doing in conjunction with a lot of the rare orphan diseases and tougher diseases to do some recruitment for. If indeed you can mobilize a community and do it through social media or however, awesome. Social media alone is not the answer. It's just like what I am doing, a tactic to be added to an overall campaign.
Right.
I don't think it's the silver bullet. I think it's facilitating community discussion, facilitating awareness building, certainly through technology. However, there is a little bit of risk in the control aspect of it as well. These are tightly controlled pieces of information that are sent out to investigators, to communities, and as tightly as they can be spun by a pharma, CRO, PRO, they can be unspun very, very easily in a social media setting. I welcome it. I know that it's not the silver bullet. I see an opportunity for it to have a good ROI, but I don't know what that ROI really is today, and I'd like to know that. I shout it out through my networks and say, you all want to hear what the metrics are, then go ahead and publish them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's one of many tools. The biggest challenge, I guess, in clinical trials is, like you said, raise awareness, get people to actually understand what clinical trials are. Because the majority of people, when you bring up clinical trials, they think guinea pig and they think lab rats, and they have no idea what a clinical trial actually is. And even physicians out there, many physicians, I would say the majority of physicians, they know what clinical trials are, but they may be hesitant to recommend or refer one of their own patients to a clinical trial because they're not participating in it, so they feel like they have no control. So it's just this whole awareness thing and education, and each of these little pieces like social media and then the things you do with the video networks, they're all tools, and hopefully they can all help raise awareness, which is the bottom line, I guess, for the industry and what we need.
And yeah, the ROI certainly needs to be there. No doubt. You can't just throw money and not have any outcomes whatsoever. But it's also tough to work in an industry that asks for innovation but doesn't seem really to invest in it. And you need to invest and take risks on what people in this industry's gut feelings are from years and years of experience and
Mm-hmm.
We're not in a socialistic society here. So whatever you say about, the altruistic aspect of physicians giving up their patients to clinical trials, they're in it for money as well. And the third-party payers that give them money for seeing chronic patients, if that revenue goes away, then they may be a little bit loath to go ahead and give up their revenue. It's a tough one to tackle. And I don't think enough people really do tackle it head on like that, but that's the reality of it. And I think that if you talk to patient recruitment people within pharma companies that I know, I've had these discussions very recently, it doesn't work in general. And you can put a lot of money to trying to get patients from other physicians, but you got to get to the patients.
Yeah. Bottom line, you do got to get to the patients. We've interviewed tons of guests on this, and that seems to be the consensus there. Daniel, as we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, share with your audience.
Yeah, anything else that we didn't cover that you think might be important, or just if they want to link up with you, I will definitely add your LinkedIn profile when this video goes up on our site.
I very much appreciate that. Yeah, the couple pieces that I would say is recruitment, retention. Retention is getting more awareness and is getting a seat at the table with strategic planning. Is getting a strategic seat at the table earlier in that planning, and it has to be, again, if we're looking at chronic diseases, if we're looking at survival studies for cancer, if we're looking at opportunities to meet the endpoints vis-a-vis keeping patients in and getting the data that's required to hit those endpoints. Retention has to be part of the overall strategy early on. I think that's major. And metrics, look, everybody, metrics are numbers, and they're guidelines. They're not regulations. I think innovative ideas need to have some investment to flourish. I'd leave it with that. I'm definitely a proponent, as everybody knows out there in my network, of innovation to the extent that there is an opportunity to have it work. And you can't have it work unless there's no investment in it. So please think about that, for not only for SiteAvail, but for other tactics and strategies that will help really help get to the access to the patients that we need for this data. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Daniel Weddle, everyone, from SiteAvail. And this is Dan, without Don today, signing off from www.theclinicaltrialsguru.com.